Greetings and warm welcome to each and every one of you who have joined us this Saturday evening UK time. We are delighted to have you take time out of your schedules to join us to be a part of this exceedingly important discussion on reparations and what role does religion have to play. Because generally, when reparations is discussed, very seldomly is the name of God mentioned, and very seldomly is religion mentioned. We do know that those who were responsible for our Holocaust, they used God's name a lot throughout the process. I remember traveling to Ghana and going to Cape Coast and going to the slave dungeons or the enslaved dungeons in Cape Coast. And the Portuguese, I believe it was, were the builders of this particular dungeon. And they had a church built inside the dungeon. And I always used to wonder, how can you be mindful of any type of God? I don't care. It could even be a Klingon god from Star Trek. But how can you justify such heinous crimes and then go and pray to whoever you believe gave you life and wakes you up in the morning? So it's always been of concern to me. And this is why it's appropriate that we have this discussion this evening so that we can have a deep dive into the role of the Most High, true and living. Because if there is a God, surely he wasn't sleeping for 360 years whilst we were being persecuted, right? And if that's not the case, we want to discuss the role of the Most High. Okay, so with that said, before we go into our discussion, I want to introduce to you two members of our panel this evening, and they're going to introduce themselves to you so that you can be fully aware of what you need to know in order to have a full appreciation of what they're bringing to this discussion. I'm going to start with my sister, Aina-Nia, and she will give you a general overview of her background. So, Sister Aina-Nia, please.
Greetings. It's such an honor to be having this very, very important conversation. I am Aina-Nia AYO'DELE Ifayemi, and Aina-Nia means she who has purpose. AYO'DELE, joy has come home, and Ifayemi because I'm a priest of the Ifa tradition. And I walk this planet as a spiritual liberation activist. And I do so through leadership coaching and ancient wisdom teaching, or I should say, the purposeful wisdom teaching. I worked mostly with institutions and individual leaders, and really doing much of what you're doing and we're all doing on this platform, which is sharing love and hoping and intending to heal those that we come in contact with. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's take our devices off of mute and let's give Sister a big round of applause of welcome. Thank you for taking time. As we go on to our second illustrious guest today, Sister Claire Williams, you may have remembered when we watched the film on Wednesday. We showcased the film on Wednesday. She played a very, very senior role in that film. So let's also extend a warm welcome to Sister Claire Williams.
Welcome, Sister Claire. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Brother Abdul-Hakeem, you're too kind. Can you hear me?
I can, loudly
Perfect.
and clearly.
You're too kind. So yeah, my name is Claire Williams. I'm currently studying for my PhD in sociology at University of Westminster, and just want to say that whilst I am studying there, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the university, but just to make that clear. I used to be a teacher for 10 years in South East London schools. I then went to do further studies, and I kind of look at the conversation between race and faith, particularly from sort of a Christian look at that, and looking at tough questions that skeptics or those who would be, rightly skeptical of faith in general, and in particular Christianity, given the kind of conversations we're having today. So that's the kind of work I do. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Again, let's give both of our wonderful guests who have taken time out their schedule a big round of applause. Thank you, sisters, for joining us. We're very appreciative. So, because time is generally the enemy when we try to come together to have these kind of very critical and important discussions, I'm going to get straight to the point. Now, in no particular order, either of you feel inclined to answer my first question, or even a question as such, engage me in our discussion. A big issue at the moment, my dear sisters, is many of us as a people are in denial over what took place during our Holocaust, particularly those who want to climb the social ladder. Now, by way of those who were involved, who are the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, from those who were the enslavers, who are in powerful positions of prominence, who really are in massive denial. How insulting is it to you and to us to hear either members of our family or just professionals and politicians in general actually deny that, there is a claim to be had, and you need to just get over it. It's in the past. There's nobody living who was responsible for what took place. How insulting is this? And how do you view that first and foremost? Ladies first. So please.
Okay, you want to start?
Sure. Okay. I'll share a couple of thoughts, and please jump in. So I think insult is the right word. I think the reason that happens where there is denial, either within members of our own community or those from other communities or ethnic backgrounds, the main reason for denial is the lack of understanding or knowledge of actually what happened. To familiarize yourself with what happened on plantations is to do reading, to take a deep dive into doing reading of slave testimony, reading of enslavers, diaries and accounts, actually coming to terms with what happened on plantations, the horror and the terror of it. And we do that with other atrocities within history. We learn it, we memorialize them, we have yearly anniversaries, we stand in silence, and rightly so, for other atrocities to human life. But actually understanding what happened in terms of the terror upon our people, upon plantations, I think that is, people don't want to know, because if you don't know, then you don't have to deal with it. And so I think within our community, when I've seen members of our community kind of maybe denying or saying, look, let's just work really hard, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, that kind of rhetoric, it's coming from a place of, respectability politics. If I just behave myself well, if I just act in such a way that then I'll be valued as human, I'll be seen as good enough.
And not to cut you, you're in the UK. You must have heard what Kimi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, said, and she's from Nigeria. And for her to say she was in conferences and, those who are so-called representing, us are hustlers pretty much. And it's just like a way to get money. Like, is she ignorant of the history? Does she not know the diarization of what took place? Like, she rubbed shoulders with the descendants of those who enslaved us on a daily basis, right? So how do we excuse someone like that? I
can't speak for Kemi, but I know I'm very well aware of her rhetoric, and I find it quite upsetting, and I think it does more harm than good. I think there is, with those who have that kind of rhetoric, there is this kind of wanting to be sort of power adjacent with whiteness, to be accepted in the eyes of our white peers. And if you do that, then there are certain rewards that may come of that. And sometimes that is often in the name of, look, let's just work hard, let's not be a victim, that kind of language. But talking about the reality of racism and what happened to our people is not the same thing as being a victim. It's not. It's talking about, it's being honest about what's being real. So I think respectability politics is a huge part of this. And I think when you start to deep it, as we millennials like to say, when you start to deep the terror of the transatlantic slave trade, and I often reading lots of stuff on it, I have to throw books down. I'm, you know, angry, tired, crying about it. It's so heavy. And I think the heaviness of it, how deep it goes, is too much for people. So they'd rather not engage, because surely the reality is I cannot be living in a completely different world to my white counterparts, but we know that it's true. But I'll stop there for that for now.
I have found there's no Caucasian person on planet Earth who I have engaged with, you know, dispassionately, who has not agreed what was done was wrong and reparations should be paid. Like, none of them. I could go out my front door right now and just pick any one of my neighbors and sit down over tea or coffee. And as uncomfortable as the conversation may be, if presented right, none of them, even members of the far right, would actually agree what happened was a Holocaust. You with me? And you can't justify it. So why then do we have Aina-Nia, a constituency who are just diehards in the face of, like, it's not as if it's hidden. Just go and watch Roots, for instance. And that's the mildest version of what took place. So no matter how mild you want to start off your quest, if the person started as mild as possible, they still would have to say, my God, this was the origin of terrorism. This was the origin of a Holocaust. This was the origin of brutalization. When you look up these words in the dictionary, transatlantic slave trade should come across as the definition of all of these. Because we gave life or birth to these things. So sister Aina-Nia, how can anybody like say, get over it? Like, it was a long time ago.
So here is this. Unhealed souls. Unhealed souls have brought into the very teachings of the enslaver. So the enslaver was really strategic, right?
Yeah.
These capitalists, these colonizers were strategic.
Yeah.
And we know this didn't happen because of race. We know this happened because of money, right?
Right.
But they were strategic, and we know, all of us who have done any little bit of study know the Willie Lynch letter. Willie Lynch was clear. Willie Lynch was kind of a coach. Today we would call him a business coach, right?
Yeah.
And so Willie Lynch said, listen, here is how you do this thing. You gotta oppress these people. You got to create distrust among them. You have to make them hate themselves and hate each other so much. And if you do that well, you will own them and control them for thousands of years. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? So the sister, who you said is Nigerian. I didn't see that news clip, but maybe because I live over here, but we have many of that. That happens everywhere. Is because she is embodying the very system that the enslavers, the colonizers, has put on us, right? And she has chosen, because she has will, she has chosen to stay in that because of her own safety. She actually does. She believes that that is safe. For me, I don't even feel insulted. I feel completely saddened. I feel saddened that we have not yet realized, in this day and age where information is at our fingertips, you don't even have to be doing a PhD to understand this and to know this and to get this information. And you stay locked in a place of denial and a place of self-hate so great, that you can continue to give the colonizers power. That's how I see it.
And so I remember, dear sisters, looking at the way how, the transatlantic slave trade is being currently packaged. And every year they try to water it down. where you could almost project in 2 generations, there will actually be no historical reference to this, because don't you think, and give me your thoughts on do you think why do you think it's taken us so long to mount to mount a successful campaign to actually force those concerned to actually recognize the evil that was done and repair the damage? Why do you think it's taken so long?
So we the people who are still in power, right? The colonizers, they don't see us as human. See, if we think about both the Arab slave trade, the African Sahara slave trade, and the transatlantic slave trade, we know that we were not seen as human beings. We're still not seen as human beings, as human. There's no humanizing of us. So when folks think about reparation and memorializing of other Holocaust, they don't yet see us in that same way. And we ourselves, because we're not yet healed, and generations, the unhealing is happening. We don't really know yet of our deservedness. And we don't really know yet that we are first peoples. We're even denying that we're first peoples. I hear people of African descent denying that we're first peoples. So if we're not there yet, then my dear brother and sister, how then are we going to possibly push this agenda forward collectively?
So do you think then, you mentioned not being viewed as being human. So therefore, it's only a superhuman could have survived what we survived. So is the converse of what you're saying that yes, we're not human, we're superhuman, which makes us divine as to the reason why we survived, because no other race could have ever survived. Like no race on planet Earth could have survived apart from a supernatural people. And is that the problem? We're so great, we're so super, we're so divine, and we're so, special, that because we keep on recreating ourselves and overcoming all of these tremendous odds, that it's seen as if, well, you don't need reparations. You don't need to be repaired because you seem to be doing a decent job of it yourself. Is that a part of the problem, Sister Claire?
Oh, sorry. I think that there is something to be said about our people's resilience. And I think that when Black people do well in any sphere of life, it is perceived as a threat. When we can come back from suffering, when we can come back from being made second-class citizens, or whatever it is seen as a threat. I was even reading some stories by Derek Bell in America. He is one of the founders of critical race theory, which we know has been massively put down in public discourse right now, and by people like Kemi Badenoch, talking about there is no such thing as systemic racism and those sorts of things. And in his stories, Derek Bell talks about how it just gives lots of different examples of how when Black people have been historically and today still in oppression, we're very resilient and we come back. And rather than that being seen as a celebration, that is seen as a threat. And so I'm in agreement with this idea that we refuse to be kept down.
Right. So if we write songs, Sister Aina-Nia, I'm a survivor. I'm gonna go get. I'm a survivor. You're a survivor, and I can leave you in this pit to figure it out, right? Because you said you're a survivor. So is our strength, a part of our weakness, or can it be a part of our weakness?
Yeah,
our
because
strength and our resilience.
I would say so, because I have stopped talking about our resilience because it's been used against us, right? So I've stopped. I don't have those conversations anymore because exactly what Sister Claire says, we're so resilient, we're supernatural, we're super beings, right? So why pay any attention to us? And that very thing is also hurting us.
Right.
And the celebration of our resilience, I don't even do that whole thing around Black excellence because I don't even know what that means, right? As opposed to what versus what, or resilience as opposed to what. And so I believe that a big part of what needs to happen, and it is happening whether we want it or not, we're seeing our folks, we're seeing our leaders having mental health, very serious mental health breakdown. We're seeing our leaders' bodies die in front of us, even if they're living. So we're seeing what this resilience does for us. And because we are proud for sure that our ancestors were tremendously resourceful and they made it through, but we also have to remember, we talk about those who lived, but we have to remember those who did not.
Right.
And most of them did not.
Right.
We have bodies in the ocean.
Right.
And so I want us to stop celebrating this resilience.
Right. So
it's becoming a tool for the colonizers.
Right. Because if a conservative estimate is that over 100 million of us died in the Middle Passage alone, then that's a loss of lives that have perished and deserve, to be remembered as much as those of us who survived. So just to fast forward to aspects of what we want to really home in on today in regards to how does religion as a whole need to be included in the discussion regarding reparations, because, it's not at the forefront. So from your perspective, how does it need to be included in the discussion? How do we insert it in the discussion for reparations? Please.
I'll go. So we cannot, because we know that the religious bodies, the highest religious bodies, were some of our key enslavers. Because we know that they promoted enslavement and they justified it. And they continued to do so even after formal slavery, legal slavery was abolished. We know this. They know this. And because we know this and they know this, they then, in their repairing of themselves, in this reconciliation that they all seem to be doing, but you can't have reconciliation without truth, they have a responsibility to be the leaders in reparation. If they are in fact living the tenets that they speak of, and I'm talking about all religions here, right? They have a responsibility. And so I see some of them trying to do some things, and I keep saying to them, you must acknowledge what you've done. You must give up your seat and your power. You must acknowledge that you are living on the wealth of your ancestors who built their wealth on the blood of my ancestors. Right? So don't talk to me about anything and about equity and anti-Black racism and anti-Africanism. Don't go to our country unless you are ready to also lead the conversation and the change and the action around reparations. That's where I stand.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, Sister Claire, we know that, if we live in England, we know the most widely spread Bible is the King James Version. And prior to the King James Version, the most popular Bible was the Geneva Bible. And the Geneva Bible condemned slavery. It condemned kings, it condemned queens and rulers as tyrants. And as a consequence of it condemning these rulers as tyrants, that's what gave rise to the translation of the King James Version, because the people here, particularly in England, were rising up based upon their exegesis of the Geneva version. So James obviously wrote his version to pacify the masses of the people, and then did not allow the Geneva Bible to be sold in the United Kingdom. They phased it out. But we do know the King James Bible in many places actually condones slavery. And, you know, and as a condoner of slavery, how do you then think, as Sister Aina-Nia mentioned, you know, what role then do these preachers have? Because obviously theologians are not just students of the King James Version, they're students of God, period. And the mere fact that the Church of England played a very pivotal role. Let's just deal with the country in which me and you are living in at the moment. The Church of England played a very pivotal role and have had discussions about paying reparations, and only for the person who was voicing such to now be sat down. How do you believe we go forward in dealing with them? Should we focus on the church exclusively and put the parliament to one side for a minute, as Sister Aina-Nia alluded to? Or should we just segue in just slightly, or should we just go full force, you know, to the church for their complicity in what happened to us?
Thank you. I think my sister there was talking about how those who were enslavers and are still benefiting from that are living in the legacy of our people's blood in fields and in streets and so on. They need to be leading the discussion, because there's something exhausting. There's something working overtime. We're trying to live, we're trying to exist, we're trying to flourish, and then to have to take the lead in teaching those who were the enslavers of their checkered history, of their bloody history, for them to take the initiative. That's too much. So I definitely agree with my sister. They need to be taking the lead. And so I do think the church does need to be the first of many institutions to realize this and to take that initiative, because another good point that my sister raised was, and she was talking about all religions, if there is meant to be this ethic of humility and this ethic of giving and loving one's neighbor and all those sorts of good ideas and good ways of being and thinking towards each other, if that is really something in each of those religions, then let's see that enacted in reparations, please. Let's see that enacted. And I think the church should be, if that's the core of who you are, and what you believe about where you stand before God, then let's see you do that.
Does that mean then that the true Christian denounces those who use the name Christianity as a shield for their dirty, irreligious practices? Because those who could conduct such heinous crimes could not have been a Christian. Because if to be a Christian is to be Christ-like, you can't be Christ-like and enslave people. You can't be Christ-like and, you know, induct people into a Holocaust. That you can't do. Okay. So does it mean, and just like the same with Islam, because Sister mentioned, and I like the way she phrased that Arab, you know, because there's a difference between an Arab and a Muslim. Now, what the Arabs did is not what you can do under the banner of Islam, but you can do it as an Arab. So similarly, just as, because I'm a practicing Muslim, and I reject anybody saying that Muslims were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. No, Arabs were involved, because the Quran clearly states that the duty of a Muslim is to free slaves and to feed people in time of hunger or destitute. So be that as it may, but it doesn't stop anybody from coming under the banner of Islam, the banner of Judaism, and the banner of Christianity. So is this the hour for the true Christian, the true Muslim, and the true Jew to stand up and denounce those who misuse their names or the title of their religion?
I think the hour has is now, but is also been, because one of the bits about my research, I'm reading lots of narratives of the formerly enslaved. And whilst I understand that there is right outrage about this idea of Christianity being weaponized against our ancestors, 100%, we know that it was used. There were certain things like the curse of Ham to justify it, certain things like the slave Bible was used to justify it, and we could go on. But it's very interesting to me when you read the narratives, the accounts of the formerly enslaved, like your Frederick Douglasses, like your Equianos, like your Mary Prince, your Harriet Jacobs, etc., etc. Many of them were drawn to the faith, were drawn to the idea of Christ and God, but their very understanding of the faith enabled them to become, strident abolitionists, to be able to condemn those who enslave them. So you're saying, and I agree with you, my brother, that is this now the time to denounce, those who were using slavery and enslaving our people as them not being the true Christians? Well, our people already did that. They wrote.
No, but I meant
accounts.
it in the current context, in the context like tomorrow is Sunday. Many Black preachers will mount their rostrums and give a sermon. Okay. So should it start with them? We can't be waiting on Caucasian preachers to take a stand. Like we're waiting forever. However, we do have Black pastors and Black congregations that should take the lead on this. So should we then encourage them to lead the line as opposed to being an extension of the denial? That is the question on the floor.
Okay.
And likewise, from an Islamic perspective, should the imams and the mullahs and the sheikhs also be forced to take a stand? And there are Black imams all over the world, but do not discuss this or dare discuss this subject matter, So, and where you are, Sister Aina-Nia, there are so many Black Muslims. There are so many. You have the largest, probably, Christian churches in America, these mega churches. There's only one major. I can't remember the brother's name, but he's setting fire to all of these pagan religions. So is that something, Sister Aina-Nia, that we should encourage, is for the Black pastors to take the point on these issues?
Yes, absolutely. And I never thought, thank you for raising that, because often we think of the leadership of the Christian or the Islamic Church as white,
Right.
It's not us. And there are so many of us. And so I completely agree with you. I'm so glad you raised that. Can you imagine then if the leaders, the Black leaders, the Black spiritual leaders, the Black religious leaders came together, or even if they didn't come together, but started to have this conversation that you're having, Minister, started to go on their pulpit and bring state and church together, right? We can't separate church and state now. Let's bring it together and start. I think that's where the movement, thank you for raising that, because I strongly believe that what you have said is, and I hope tons of folks are listening, could be the beginning of something really, really powerful. And I'm sure there are spiritual and religious leaders doing this, but it needs to be more so, and it needs to be more prevalent. So yes to that.
Fantastic. So Sister Claire, then, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews who recognize this to be an abomination against the true will of God. Like, for instance, my Allah is not the same Allah as those who were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Their God is not the same as mine. So the Christ figure, who many Christians say is the savior, he can't be the same Christ figure as the Christ figure that condoned slavery. So there's not the true Christian have to delineate between his Christ and the pagan false Christ. Because you think about it, many say that Jesus had 12 disciples. Well, if Jesus had 12 disciples, is it possible for a man to be born in Palestine and have 12 disciples, namely named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, while speaking Aramaic and Arabic? These are European names, so we know something's wrong with that picture, right? So should we now make it very clear, and very concise that their God over there is not the God of my spirituality? Because the way how God is perceived is there's only one God and he's all the same and we all see him from different perspectives. No, no, no. It's not a perspective. It's actually a massive deception that's being played on us. So we need to, don't you think, totally separate ourselves from an institution that put us into or led us into a Holocaust. Popes who sanctioned our brutalization. Should we still allow, popes to be voted who do not, reconcile the tremendously hypocritical history that they're standing on?
Yeah, and I think
if I'm sounding a bit too radical, you got to let me know. I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
I think
I'm not here for that. But as the conversation develops, I think, just like, when you do not get along with somebody and you do not share their views, you divorce, right? And you go your separate ways. And it's very clear, I divorce you for these reasons. And it might just be, we have irreconcilable differences. So should not, or does not the Black church have irreconcilable differences with the old Caucasian church? Does not the Black Muslims have irreconcilable differences with Arabs who were involved and condoned a form of slavery in the sub-Saharan desert? We have irreconcilable differences. In order for our differences to be reconciled, you have to admit the evil that was done by your ancestors. Then we can sit and talk. But other than that, you are not welcome over here. And we certainly will not be going over there. Are we at that time? I think is my question.
Yes, we are at that time. And I think there has been some important work already done. Books like The Whitewashing of Christianity, for instance, by Jerome Gay Jr. He's a pastor in America. Reverend Carlton Turner has written a book called Caribbean Contextual Theology, where he looks at the toxicity of white Western colonial Christianity and its harmful forms. Different books by other authors looking, and you've had Professor Robert Beckford on before, looking at that something went wrong somewhere with Christianity, and I can only speak because that's my kind of background. I am a Christian, so we do need to make this separation. And I was trying to say with my previous point is that our ancestors already started to do that. So as I said, when you read those accounts of the formerly enslaved, they're able to make this distinction, to see how the faith was weaponized against them. And I think we would do well to follow in their footsteps. I think a lot of their literature needs to be read more widely in our circles, because a lot of what you're talking about, and you talk about radicalism, and I think there's something, when you're talking about freedom, there is a radical element to it, because let us go, let my people go, let us go. So I think the time is now, and I think there has been a lot of work that goes maybe unmentioned, like that grassroots activism within local communities, within local faith groups. But I think that there is a trend that I'm seeing a lot more, and I can only talk about Christian pastors writing more and speaking out more vocally about this kind of toxic, making a separation between toxic colonial Christianity and what they see as a religion that came out of a region of the world that was not even Europe, that arose, like you said, you made the point that you've got this religion rising out of parts of the world that wasn't even European, that didn't even arrive into Europe until much further on, apart from, so I just think I'm in agreement with you.
Is it the problem then, my dear sister, with many of these pastors who talk, that they actually have resources and don't use those resources in the best interest of their own people? Because it's one thing to put out a paper, but then you go along to get along because you're receiving funding from maybe, the Catholic Church, or maybe a fund that funds preachers, but you're not going to challenge the contradictions that are in the scriptures. And that is also, commonplace amongst Christians. So for instance, the mere fact that James, King James, who is a known effeminate, and God says no effeminate will enter into his kingdom. This is the Bible that preachers preach out of. Then, because we haven't addressed the heinous crimes of the church and religion by way of what was done to us, is it no surprise that now they're just trampling over everything of morality where the scriptures are concerned? Is it no surprise? Is it because we haven't clipped them from what they did to us? Now nothing is sacred. You know, absolutely nothing. So Sister Nia, Aina-Nia, you know, I want to just target with you specifically on the point of should we not be taking our charges directly to some of these churches and mosques and synagogues one by one?
See, I think we should, yes. But for me, everything for me starts with the healing, right? It starts with the healing. There is a healing that is needed for our own people, and the understanding of who we were pre the transatlantic slave trade, pre the Arab slave trade, pre colonization, right? There is a healing, I believe, that is needed. And
Sure.
even within those past, we have to return to ourselves. We have to return to who we are as spiritual beings, as
Is
divine.
that possible whilst this issue is still outstanding? And I say that to say this. Is the reason why many of us are Pan-Africanists, like many of us, we say we are Pan-Africanists, is that because the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews who know members of that community or who call themselves that, you know, because these religions, if you will, by name, played a part in our dehumanization, it justifies anybody calling themselves Pan-Africanist, because who would want to align themselves with the spiritual values of that, which was a part of their Holocaust, if you will?
So sometimes the problem with Pan-Africanism, right, and those of us who call ourselves Pan-Africanism, is that we are doing Pan-Africanism from a colonialized place.
Right.
Right? We're doing these changes from a colonialized place. And so that, therefore, is the absence of spirituality, and specifically African spirituality. I can only speak, that is my practice, that is where I come from, because African spirituality is the science of teaching our minds to get what we desire, right?
But is the reason for that because those of us in these religions haven't cleansed these religions to offer a place spiritually for our Pan-Africanist family? So, for instance, where the Nation of Islam is concerned, we burn with fire any Arab who was involved in the transatlantic slave trade, any Christian who was involved in the transatlantic slave trade. And we have written volumes on the Jewish, role in the transatlantic slave trade. So we pull the cover off of everyone, because the prophet of Christianity, the prophet of Judaism, the prophet of Islam, these were men of God. But there are those who are using their great and noble name as a shield for their dirty, irreligious practices. So until we stand up for the prophets and purify their names, then are we then, who don't do that, complicit with the slave masters? Are we complicit if we just are saying, okay, I am a Christian? You mentioned, Sister Claire, you're a Christian. So as a Christian, you believe in God. Where was he when we were suffering? Where was the God you believe in during that time?
Sure, thank you for that question. The God I believe in, where was he? I think the first thing I'll say to that is again, when I read the accounts of those who were enslaved by white Western powers, you will see that God was there with them. In that, what I'm trying to say is that they didn't view what happened to them as the hand of God working against them. They saw that this was the result of fallen human brokenness, the arrogance of the human heart, and that 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 rose up in our enslavers to enslave them. Also, there is an assumption which I think we do need to challenge, that Black people were not part of the Christian faith prior to the transatlantic slave trade. They only encountered the God of Christianity through transatlantic slave trade, and that's not true. We know about the early church in Ethiopia. We know about other forms where nations became followers of Jesus prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And it's a fantastic film. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's called Unspoken. If you just search Unspoken documentary, this question.
But that Jesus that you're referring to looks like them Africans, right?
Yeah, I think the imagery we have of Jesus today is very white, Western, and whitewashed. It's kind of like the
right. So the Christianity that you're speaking about that existed in Africa prior to European conquest was a Black-centric Christianity.
Well, yes, because I think that what you're saying is, where you're asking me where was God. I think it's a bit of a unfair question. Where was God?
I'm good.
I think you're asking me where was God. Well,
I think it's actually the question of the day.
Our people already knew him. Our people already knew him. So if you're asking where God was, well, God wasn't.
Why didn't he prevent that? Because if undeserved suffering is redemptive, and we done nothing to justify being brutalized to that level over that protracted period, and for God to be loved as we're taught, where was his love for that period of time? Or was his purpose for us far greater than our suffering? And if his purpose for us was and is far greater than our suffering, then what is his purpose for us in the final analysis? Because there's a final analysis here. We've gone through something, and those who were responsible for putting us through what we went through refuse to even give us an insincere apology. So therefore, they're not worthy of forgiveness. And if they're not worthy of forgiveness because they're not asking for forgiveness, what they are saying is like, what we did is what we did. So what? So what? Make me apologize. And up to this point, we haven't been able to make them apologize. There's no pressure we have brought to date that has forced them to say, you know something, I tap out, I submit. Now, people who have suffered less than us have been able to appeal to the powers that be and cause them to tap out and to pay reparations. So because we haven't been able to bring them to the bar of forgiveness, then there must be a great reward for us, I'm thinking. So I'm thinking, is our appeal to them for reparations really more for their salvation than for ours? Because we're the victors, because we have endured, and there's a great reward for us. That's where I'm really going with the question.
I think that reparations for me isn't about a question of my salvation. My salvation, your salvation is based upon my relationship with God. Reparation for me is the enacting of justice. Okay, that justice must be served. At the moment, our community is absolving all of what happened to us in and of ourselves. We're paying for it technically through all the disparities that we could cite in our living conditions, all those sorts of things, life expectancy, maternal deaths, strip search by police, stop and search by police, all of these disparities, we are absolving that. And like you say, I think they do need to be brought to a place of repentance. But them paying reparations for me is a separate issue from my salvation. It's about them seeing what they did was wrong. And so I think that I think as well, one thing we need to be clear about as well is that reparation isn't just an appeal to the moral inclinations of someone's heart, because there are so many laws that are entangled within the legacies of slavery. We know that the Bank of England has dealings with the legacies of slavery. So many different institutions. There's a really great paper by Catherine Hall at UCL University. They were tracing back the amount, the tentacles of slavery in British institutions, where we see how the British institutions and economies have really
it permeates everything.
Exactly. And so, yes,
and because it permeates everything, don't mean to cut you.
Mm-hmm.
And when compensation was paid to the enslaved owners, that money was paid over 184 years. Mm-hmm. So even though those who were directly involved died and are gone, their families received an income for 184 years. So is it not hypocritical for those living today to say we weren't involved, but you took the money up until 2015? Mm-hmm. So if you took the money up until 2015, then you are the beneficiaries of blood money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So should we not then individually go after the families who were responsible for enslaving our families? Because remember, the government was just the law enforcer, and they granted these laws. And even much of what happened, family, in the Caribbeans and in America, it was actually illegal here in the UK. So it was lawful to rape in Barbados when our ancestors were there, but you would go to jail if you done that in England. It was illegal to brand somebody with a hot iron in this country at that time, but it was lawful in the Caribbean, lawful in the Americas. So the mere fact that those concerned, they knew right from wrong. they knew, they actually had a moral compass in their own country. So be that as it may, don't we have a case up until 2015, against those who were receiving checks? Sister Aina-Nia, don't we have a case? Like, is there not a claim?
Of course there's a case. And they know that there's a case, right? So there is, I don't think any of this is ignorance. All of this is choices, right? And people wanting to just go along to get along. And we all just want to keep this thing going. There is, I'm stuck on your question about God. Where was God? Yes. Yeah. The God that I know.
Yes.
The God that I know, the God of my ancestors, gave us free will.
Yes.
Right? The God of our ancestors gave us free will. And the God of our ancestors said that all these, there are many gods. It's kind of, you were talking about that earlier, right? There are many gods. And I would say that where was God? The God of our ancestors gave these people free will, and this is what they chose to do. I also know that the God of our ancestors were with our ancestors even in the bottom of the ship.
But did he not give us the power of self-defense then?
And we did.
Because remember this.
There are many stories. We know the stories. We absolutely defended ourselves. First, let me be clear. The white people, the colonizers, did not give us freedom. We gave ourselves freedom.
Right.
Because we saw God stayed with us.
Right. So we're trying to reclaim the God of righteousness. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to identify his hand through this whole process so we may join with it, as opposed to joining on to the God of the enslaver. Because many of us have come out of that experience locking arms with the God of the enslaver. So the whole idea today is, how do we now delineate between the God of the enslaver and the God of righteousness who has brought us through this Holocaust, and how can we insert the true and living God into the process of appealing for reparations from the masses or from the powers that be? How do we introduce the God of righteousness into the conversation and use his righteousness, as he was the one to allow this to take place? How does he bring justice to both parties? Final question, then we're going to go to the audience. And
God is not out. Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
So God is not outside of ourselves. That God of righteousness is me. That God of righteousness is you. And I believe that we are at a time in this universe where the vibration, there is so many of us that are light. There are so many of us that are seeing and knowing God and walking as God. There are so many of us that this is the time, even though we're seeing all the eruptions, it's happening. But this is the time. There are enough of us to rise up now together and bring justice through righteousness. I think this is the time because we are in the right place.
Sister Claire?
I think the way to bring the God of righteousness into what you're saying is, for me, when I look at the biblical text, I think you can make a very strong biblical case for reparation. You can do that in the New Testament with Zacchaeus, the tax collector who tried to run up to it in a tree to see Jesus. He was a tax collector. He was oppressing his own people. Okay. Right. And then he was told to repair. Also in the Old Testament, the whole litany of the Old Testament prophets is remember the widow, remember the orphan, remember the poor. This is the God of justice, God sending his own people into judgment because of the way they oppressed others. And also the book of I think it's not Numbers, it's who is it now? Nehemiah. In the book of Nehemiah, a group of people are freed from enslavement, and then their own people begin to oppress them. The prophet Nehemiah tells them to stop, and he tells them to pay back everything. So we've got precedents within scripture. It's just that the established church chooses to ignore. You can make a very strong biblical case. Reparations is not antithetical to the Bible, to the biblical text at all, but it's what we platform, what we amplify in our exegesis, as you mentioned before, and what remains silent. So I think just refer to the text, see what it says. Right. And you can see that people are meant to have repair. And also just one more point I'll make, even in Old Testament passages where you do have those who were enslaved, when they were given the year of Jubilee, or when they were freed, they were told to be given stuff, like given houses, given land, given stuff to start a family. So this idea of reparation is not new. It's not some newfangled woke. And that's what a lot of the right will talk, that use that ridiculous, they've totally inverted what we mean. Woke narrative, cultural Marxism, the wokerati, all that sort of stuff. It's not new. The God of justice, has already established ways to repair when people have been oppressed. And I just think it's return to the text. Right. Return to the text.
So therefore, these current religious rulers have really hijacked spirituality, and they're holding, the spiritual community under hostage, because it seems as if the book has just been whitewashed. Because if we read in the book of Genesis, 15th chapter, 13th verse, where God was speaking to Abraham about his seed and said to him, know of a surety, Abraham, that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. And they shall serve the stranger for 400 years. And that was pretty much the length of time that we were in bondage. But then the God says, as a reward, then after that period, I will come and judge that nation whom they shall serve. So judgment can't take place until warning takes place. So the mere fact that we're asking, in a respectful way, right the wrong, right the wrong, right the wrong, and those powers that be are not hearing, then they're under judgment. And then he said that he would come and he would judge that nation whom they shall serve. And we will come out with great substance and go back home to our fathers and live out the rest of our life in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. Now, we don't call ourselves the seed of Abraham. And is that the problem? Because you got some fellas in the Middle East at the moment running around killing everybody, but they're calling themselves the seed of Abraham. So is it a matter of mistaken identity just to cap everything off? Is there a case for mistaken identity, and has somebody robbed us of our clothes?
Well, yes, somebody has robbed us and has destroyed our dreams and our abilities. We have been absolutely wrong. That is for sure. That is for sure. But I think also I wish I could have clipped something you said, because what you were speaking was prophecy. And you're talking about the time we're in right now. When you talked about, and we shall return home, and there shall be, and I don't have the exact word, but you said something about the perpetrators being punished.
Yes,
I think
judged.
isn't that what we're seeing right now, though, right across the world?
Right.
And don't we know, those of us who are faithful and are living with righteous godness, don't we know that the time is coming?
Yes.
That we shall return home? I think you just spoke prophecy.
Right.
Prophecy is revealing itself right now.
Fantastic. So just to cap off, Sister Claire, would you like to just chime in on that point, and then we will go to the audience?
I think the mistaken identity, or the identity theft, is stripping us, the calculated, systematic stripping away of our humanity. Like you began this conversation by talking about, I think this is a nice way to circle back. You began by talking about how we were seen as less than human. And I think that is the primary theft of our humanity, being stripped away in their eyes in order to oppress, in order to keep back from flourishing and success. So I think that what we need to do is reclaim that, as our sister said, for ourselves, and that takes inner work, that takes healing, but also to hold the powers that be to account.
And is the healing really for us to reclaim even the names that were stripped from us, the culture that was stripped from us, the connection to God we had prior to being interfered with, for that to be restored? Name, culture, religion, and then we can have a proper perspective on who God is. But without these things, restoration seems afar off. So I could talk to you both all year. And I hate to have to bring this segment to a close, but I'm encouraged to share you both with the audience. Okay. So we're going to have a sift through what has been discussed in the chat when Brother Hakim, my co-host, comes back. But until he comes back on the line, he's here. So, Brother Hakim, over to you for this final part of our program.
Thank you, Minister Abdul-Hakeem Mohammedan. Greetings, Sister Claire, and greetings, Sister Aina-Nia. It's an honor and pleasure listening to you both. So, to our listening and watching audience, if you want to engage with our esteemed and august panelists, then all you need to do is just raise your virtual hands. Our admin team will recognize you. You'll be able to then control your mic and put your questions forward to the panelists. Or if you're going to make a statement, please make sure that it's just a succinct statement. We're not a Hyde Park Corner, so it's not a free-for-all for those of you that know Hyde Park Corner. So please be disciplined, and you can engage live with our panelists. But can I just take these few moments to say, from the last points I was hearing, and I think it's really important that when we reflect on reparations, especially the aspect of self-repair, and considering that we're dealing with it from a religious, spiritual perspective, I think that all the points that were made were were so insightful and necessary. And if we can all agree, as I know I'd put these points forward before, that if our Holocaust, if our Ma'afa was the worst crime committed on humanity, the most heinous of crimes, then shouldn't the most impactful and most historical changing horror within human history, wasn't that foretold in the Medjugorje, or as some people like to call the hieroglyphics? Didn't Amun-Ra Pitar foresee this? Isn't this in the traditions of Olodumare? Didn't Olodumare foresee it with the divine energy of Asay? Shouldn't there have been a forewarning? Wasn't it forewritten in the scriptures of the Torah or the Bible or the Holy Quran? And if so, then what is the retribution that has been put forward from Olodumare or Amun-Ra Pitar or Jah or Allah? If not, does it mean that the deity, the Most High, God or Jah, doesn't give a damn about us? And going back to the last point that Sister Claire said, Sister, and also Sister Claire, I know that you're a great scholar in sociology, so I know you can break down better than any of us when a social group can find a social purpose and use their belief system to have an impact for social purpose. And I'm sure as a sociologist, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to formulate a theology of reparations or reparations theology? Considering that there is a group out there that already shows, rightly or wrongly, I know this is going to be another argument for another time, but when we look at the state of Israel and an aspect of how that was formulated, it wasn't just politically, it wasn't just economically. They've also formulated that state in a theological sense, in justification of their actions, that it was promised to them from God. So do we use, or have we formulated an effective reparations theology or theology of reparations to put forward our case? And if so, how do we appeal to God for reparations? For those of us that are spiritual or religious, how do you appeal to God or the Most High for reparations? So can that also be a further discussion point?
Sister Claire?
Sorry, yeah, I was just waiting for others if they wanted to speak. I'm kind of going to repeat some of what I was suggesting. If I'm understanding your question correctly, Brother Hakim, and please do let me know if I'm not. So I think I think the idea of reparation has to come out of a theological framework anyway. I can't see an atheistic framework delivering that. I can't see a political one. I think it needs to come from a place where you repair people you've oppressed and injured, precisely because in injuring and oppressing them, you're causing an affront to the holy God who created them. So,
sorry, sis, but how do we then make that appealing? How do we make it attractive? Because as I'm sure as you know, when we look at, I don't know what the situation is in Canada, but out here, we know that the numbers of churchgoers are falling, except amongst Caribbean and Africans. We know that really it's Caribbean and Africans that are still keeping a lot of the churches going. Even anecdotally, I was with an Uber driver last week, Hindu, and he was having a conversation about his pickups over the weekend, And he was just, relaying to me how on a Sunday, the majority of his fears are from African and African Caribbean people going to church. So we know the numbers are not falling as drastically as amongst the white population of the UK going to church. But however, we also still know amongst young people, there's a kind of maybe a disconnect to a certain degree, from the church or from a spiritual aspect. And it's like, no, don't talk to me about God. I just want to know, how do we deal with this in a real way? So how do we make what you were saying there appealing or attractive so it has that impact?
Well, I think that this is a very justice conscious generation. Like you were talking about, young people, particularly Gen Z, are very justice focused, and actually taking that sense of wanting justice. They're protesters, they're activists, and organizing. I think someone talked about maybe collaboration before, organizing this to make an impact on the powers that be. Let me just give you an example of, let's just say, what's his name, the footballer. It's gone out of my head, but he play. I think he plays anyway.
You know which team?
Do I know which team? I'm terrible. He grew up in a single parent family, and he had to have breakfast at school. Marcus Rashford, that was it. What did he play for? I'm sorry,
Man United.
Man United.
Them losers.
Them losers. Listen, I don't want to start a fight. What I'm saying is, Marcus Rashford, when he was 22, wrote an open letter on his Twitter account, which talked about giving meals to families who needed it during the school summer holiday because of COVID. Yeah. And because of that letter, because he was so young and he loves justice, this generation, he turned the policy of the UK government under Boris Johnson. So this justice conscious generation has impact. They can turn things around that maybe my old millennial self can't.
Yeah.
So I think it's about
now, Sister Claire. Old.
Listen, I'm an old millennial. Yeah, these Gen Z and Gen Alphas, man, they're
we're
on a
not
different
having
level.
that.
But what I'm saying is, there is power within the generation to put pressure upon those who are in power to make changes, and I think that's a really clear example from someone like Marcus Rashford. There are other young people I could talk about as well, but I think that. The idea of justice, I think that is your way forward, not just because if people are interested in religion, and we know that we're becoming a lot more secular in the West, with the exception of ethnic minority churches who are keeping religion in different circles going. I think justice is the way forward, having that conversation.
Can I just insert this, Brother Hakim? Because if we're talking about like reparations by way of definition, repair those concerned back to the position that they would have been in if they were not interfered with. And as we were discussing a few weeks ago, that if we weren't interfered with, the example that has been given is we would be on the level of that film Black Panthers. So who's willing to put us in that position where we're self-governing, on a scientific level, where we can absolutely have our own land and have our own governance that is not interfered with by the former oppressor. So reparations versus tokenization, I think is where we're in trouble today, because tokenism is not going to help us, but reestablishing the person to where they would be had they not been interfered with, I don't even think is on the table of those concerns, is it, Brother Hakim?
Well, I would say so, but again, I mean, it's what the panelists will put forward regarding that point.
What do you think then, Sister Aina-Nia?
If I mean, so we have large religious institutions and collaboration of large religious. Last year, I spoke at a conference, one of the largest conference. Every religion was there, 10,000 people. So the Parliament of World Religion is what I'm talking about. Lots of Nation of Islam was there as well. And so when we look at something that huge, I feel that there is an opportunity there for a bunch of us to write an open letter, right? And start this conversation and hold these religious leaders to account, starting there. Because when we look at somewhere like Parliament of World Religion, and yes, I'm calling you out because, you know, I've written them a few times, they speak about justice. And a lot of these religious leaders are speaking about justice, but it's the tokenism that you're talking about, Minister, right? The intention and the impact are two different things. And so I feel this is one place where there's an opportunity for these people. And these people have power and they also have money. And they are descendants of enslavers who have taken our dreams away. So I think that's a practical way for us to start these conversations. And I also would offer that this doesn't end here in this panel discussion, that we take the next steps. And there are lots and lots of people. I know Claire knows many of them. There's lots of it happening in Canada around reparation, and people are taking milestones. And so we have some examples and we have some traction that we can build on. So that's what I'd offer. If I could, though, reparation has to begin with reconciliation. And reconciliation has to begin with ownership, which is taking ownership for what happened, acknowledging what happened, being taking responsibility to reconcile. It's not for Black people, not for African people to do that.
Sure. Let me ask you this. Do you think, because it's wrong for anybody to ask others to do for them what they can do for themselves? So even though we're old, it doesn't mean we should sit down and do nothing until that debt is paid. Do you think a big step in the right direction for many of us was during the time of the year of return in Ghana? Okay. In Ghana, the government, issued out an invitation for those who are the sons and daughters of Africa to come back home. Even though we still had to buy our own homes, they didn't set land aside for us and give us anything, really. We had to even buy our own ticket to come back home, right? Even though, no one asked us to leave. We had to buy our ticket to go back home, right? So the government could have sent us tickets, but they didn't. But the mere fact that we decided to go back home, and every year there are hundreds of Americans and those from throughout the diaspora who are saying now, I want to leave the West and stop contributing, as the Bible would say, Sister Claire, no longer give my energy onto the beast, okay? Now I want to use the rest of my life to build up Africa, build up the Caribbean. Do you think that is how we self-repair? Is that a form of self-repair for us to say, we'll bridge up? Now it's time. Let me go to Africa and contribute my excellence. Let me go to the Caribbean and contribute my excellence. Is that a starting point?
My ancestors are dancing right now because that is it. We have to take back. We have to do the Sankofa. We have to return. We have to go back. We have to take back our names. We have to take back our ways of being. We have to take back our way of fellowshipping, our way of worshiping, our way of being. We have to take it back. Our ancestors have left us the tools and the tenets. And by the way, and I know I might get in trouble for this. I don't really care. I get in trouble all the time. By the way, we have tools of our ancestors that we can use if we really get serious to create the reparation. And these people will give us what we're owed and don't even know that they've given it to us. We have tools, but we must access it. And for me, with all respect, it is not the religious tools that have been put upon us. It is our spiritual practices that we know that we can use to repair ourselves, to restore, to repair ourselves, to restore ourselves, and to come into truth with ourselves. But we have to take back ourselves.
Fabulous. Brother Hakim?
Okay, thank you for that, sister. I don't want to ignore questions that have been put forward in the chat. So one of the first questions that was put forward is, do we need to rename the term transatlantic slave trade? I think in a certain sense, we already have been starting to do that, right? Especially
Right.
with the term Arthur. But what do you think of that, Sister Aina-Nia and Sister Claire?
Sister Claire, go ahead.
I think that using more weightier terms, like I'm not sure of the term you use, but I've seen you put it in a question like Holocaust, those sorts of things. I think using those weighted terms helps to bring make clearer just how deep the terror of slavery was. I went to to Poland. I went to Auschwitz. Okay, I've seen it, and it is an eerie, sad, sad, sad place to go. And it is a place that should be remembered and revered and that sort of thing. But I also think, and you mentioned this at the start there, Minister Abdul, you mentioned Elmina Castle. Yeah. I think that location should also be just as much in the minds and the hearts of people who want to respect atrocities and tragedies of the past as well. So I do think language can actually make that just make it more real for people and let them understand the terror, because I think there is still very much this idea of the happy slave, okay, who was just willing to say, oh yes, master, that sort of thing. So using appropriate language is going to hit home much more clearly.
Because I suppose when you hear transatlantic slave trade, Claire, it sounds like it was an equal business opportunity, which it wasn't. And for those that are not familiar with the term Ma'afa, it's a Swahili term that means the great disaster or great calamity.
Don't you think then, Brother Hakim?
So there are other terms that African scholars and Pan-Africanists are now starting to bring forth, coming from our own definition.
But don't you think it's important that because the Holocaust was in the English language primarily, that the term should be in a language that is universal, because Swahili is not universal. So just like Claire couldn't give you a definition of that, but she would have an understanding of the transatlantic slave trade and say we should use heavier words. But if we start using Swahili terms that are not global, will it not dilute, our desire for global impact?
Goes back to, I think, the point or question I put forward before about how do we make our reparations appealing? And so, as Claire pointed out, in my correspondence with Claire, I use the term Holocaust.
Right.
If I was in Kenya, relating to my Kenyan brothers and sisters, then I would actually use the term Ma'afa and get them out of the term transatlantic slave trade and replace it with Ma'afa. So sometimes also, it's it goes back to even the spine and backbone of propagating the teachings that you prescribe to. When Master Farah Muhammad arrived, he didn't come wearing a kufi and a jalabia.
Exactly. He spoke the language of the people.
Right. He had 5 silks over his arm, right?
You're right.
Right. So we got to know what we're wearing. Are we in the right appropriate clothes when we're knocking on the door to get the right attraction, to get the right appeal? So language is very, very important. As long as I can remember something that you said years ago in a meeting, regardless of whether you're speaking to me in English or in Arabic or in Swahili, I just want the language of truth.
Right.
So as long as the terminologies that we use and we choose to use are encroached and are born out of the source of truth, then you know what, we can use whatever terminology we see fit to have that gravitas, to have the appeal and the effect and the impact that we want and that we need, because one of the aspects to become self-liberating is to become self-defining.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I'm gonna, before I go back to the chat, because there is a question in the chat, and Mr. Togobo, you could have put this question forward yourself, but before I come back to your question, I do want to recognize Empress Judah, who has her hand up. So Empress Judah wants to put a question forward to the panelists. So if we can allow her mic to be live, Empress Judah, go ahead.
Yes, greetings.
Greetings.
We have 5 more minutes, Brother Hakeem.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Put your question forward. We can hear you clearly.
Wasn't really so much a question. It's just a quick contribution to reinforce the point about language and what Minister Hakim was saying in regards to the use of the word slave trade. The actual correct terminology is European transatlantic slave trade. And we shouldn't shy away from saying that, because if we just simply say slave trade, that doesn't tell anyone anything. When we say European transatlantic slave trade, we're acknowledging Spanish, French, German, British, the whole drama, Berlin 1834 and prior to. So that's critically important. Yes. And I'm glad you made the distinction between the Arab slave trade, because when we're looking at reparations, we're also looking at, as you said, not necessarily Muslims or fake Muslims, but we're looking at the Arab region that invaded Africa prior to the European transatlantic slave trade. And
and remember this, Sister Judah, we, the Nation of Islam, are totally on board with that claim.
Praise God.
So because there are Muslim brothers, we'll lead that.
Amen. And I'm so pleased to hear that, because again, I agree with you. I was listening right from the beginning. We're at a time now where we have to separate whether we're Christians or whether we're Muslims, not because we want a silly little argument. This is of major significance. Walter Rodney documented up to 100 million. Again, Minister Mohammed, you mentioned that. It's critically important we don't accept Tony Blair's pathetic figure of 2-3 million that he was an estimate during what we dubbed in the community here as the Wilbur farce, not the Wilberforce. My final is in respect to listening to the wider conversation. I'm a reparations activist who was trained and taught by Bernie Grant. He was the first leader over 30 years ago in Europe when reparations, he was talking high treason, just using that word in the Houses of Parliament. We have made steady progress, but that progress can only bring us nearer to the victory of getting economic justice, because economic justice is part of reparations. That will allow us to lead those Black healing programs that have got to happen in Africa and in the Caribbean. We can't have, and this is for another debate, us having now white reparations activists under the guise of the parliamentary team telling us we will have a conference in Germany. That's an insult. We should be having a reparations conference in Jamaica or Africa.
Thank you, Judah.
I'm going to say this, Empress. I'm going to say this to you as some guiding principles, okay? You need to put yourself forward a lot more, because you have people looking like you and me trying to front the claim for reparation and putting themselves forward as our representatives. And they are a Trojan horse. They have the right lingo to get into the right rooms and into the right meetings, but they're funded by our enemies. And I've known you a long time, and I know that you are sincere, and I can hear it in your voice. But I need to see you more engaged, you know, in some of these discussions that we're having, because in the absence of someone like you, who has no fear for these people being on the forefront, then these lesser beings who are eloquent, but they're lesser beings and they're without spine, they're going forward and they're misrepresenting for their own personal gains. Okay. So just some guidance for you.
But yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is something that's been going on for a long time.
A long time.
And many of us.
I remember being at a conference in Europe on reparations, and there was, you know, some representatives from here and so-called speaking about reparations. And George Soros actually paid for their ticket to travel.
There we go.
So the mere fact that a demon like that would pay for a ticket for you to attend a reparations conference is a sign to me that you will take money from anybody in order to further your personal aims and objectives. So let's be mindful of these wolves in sheep's clothing.
Most definitely. Yes, and we'll have to talk further offline because there will come a point where we'll have to identify them. I will online now say that I have made my difference of opinion, for example, with Joy Bell Ribeiro Addy, who just joined literally in the past 2-3 years. So there are points of principle that we have to separate on. If we get ourselves organized, we have victory is ours. They're only talking about it in Parliament now because of the hard work kicked off in this country by Bernie Grant, okay? And I've been in gatherings where I've had to pay, and fundamentally, we should not even have to pay to go, right? Absolutely. But I've had to go because I wanted to hear what the other conversation's about, again, without saying who these people are. And it's clear, as you said, Minister, they have an agenda. But we are here for the masses.
And soon we're going to put them all on blast because we're not like going to be of the mind where without naming people, what? We don't name them so that they can go and deceive others? Well, no, they need to be named and shamed and identified.
We have to be strategic.
Like, I'm not asking you to do that now. I'm just saying, like, going forward, we will stop saying that. In the future, we will stop saying that. So let's wait until 2025. Then no one's safe. Who's at the back door taking chicken and biscuits, from the enemy? You're not safe.
We could have a CQT Cat Williams session for 2025. Put everyone on blast.
Everyone on. Yeah, so that's what we'll call it, Brother Hakim. We'll call it the blast. So we have. Thank you, Empress. Thank you so much.
Have we got time for one more question from the chat?
It would have to be an actual question.
It is a question.
We're beyond our time, so yes, we can.
I mean, it's not a statement. I have chosen. It is a question, and I would imagine, Sister Aina-Nia, I'll throw this one at you. If you can just sum it up real briefly. Sorry about this. When we think of Moses being an inspiration to Hebrew/Judaism and in African spirituality, he was raised in the Kemetic practices. What is the relationship between African spirituality and the main religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity?
Well, I'll be really quick. African spirituality and African religions are the origins.
Right.
We're the first people. We're the origins. Everything comes from us. And we can see it. Like, I'm not making it up. We have evidence of that. Everything comes from us. Many.
Well, we put the sun out there, Sister Aina. So the sun is ours.
The sun. It's simple. We just have to believe that and know that and stop pretending that it's something else. And
all what you do is ask two Caucasian persons to produce us. If they copulate for 1 million years, they can't produce us. But the original people can produce brown, red, yellow, and white.
We do, and we are.
The whole world is in us. Yeah. And we're not using that as boasting rights. Everything just has to be put in its proper place. And for that person who looks like me and you to think that they're at the bottom when they really are the sons and daughters of the Creator himself, then it's unfortunate. And we had Fuse ODG on our show a couple of weeks ago, and Fuse was challenging Bob Geldof where this band aid is concerned. And Fuse challenged him to the degree because the way how band aid has misrepresented our community, it's caused Africans to not want to be African. They were claimed to be Caribbean and others because of the ugly images that has been sent around the world of Africa. So if we don't challenge this, then we are sentencing ourselves and our babies to a complex about in regards to who they really are, and we rob them of the right to be proud of their ancestry. Okay, so we must challenge these things, and we must establish who we are. And anybody who's got an argument against that, then they need to bring the science, because we're bringing the science. Okay, so that's it from me. So, Brother Hakim, are there any closing comments that you would like to share with us?
Just one, because I was originally going to show the letter that, if we were from our last CQ.
I think we've got time for that. We made a promise.
I was gonna put it on hold. What I will
we get a one in the chat if you're going to give us 5 more minutes, please, because we said we were going to do something. We were going to send a letter to Kimi Badenoff asking her to apologize for what she said, because we are not appreciative of her calling our family and our claim for reparations a hustle. We're not pleased with that, and that needs to be addressed. So please put a 1 if you give us 5 minutes, because we want to read you the letter and get your approval before we send it. Can we get some 1s? Well, we're past halfway, so I would okay. Proceed.
Can we see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I write with grave concern regarding your remarks at the City UK's International Conference in April 2024, where you asserted that the UK's wealth is not derived from white privilege or colonialism, and your statement on GB News in October labeling reparations as a scam. These views disregard well-documented historical truths and undermine efforts towards justice, reconciliation, and social equality for the descendants of enslaved Africans in the UK and the world. It is an undeniable fact.
I would just change that bit to worldwide.
Well, this is the reason why I didn't really want to bring it up right now.
Okay, well, continue, please.
It is an undeniable fact that the United Kingdom's wealth was built on the exploitation of enslaved Africans and the resources of colonized nations. Industries such as sugar, cotton, and shipping were driven by forced labor, creating immense wealth for Britain while leaving African nations and peoples impoverished and disenfranchised. Even the abolition of slavery saw the UK compensate slave owners with £20 million, equivalent to billions today, while the enslaved received nothing but systemic discrimination, the effects of which are still evident in education, health, and economic inequalities. Your comments dismissing reparations as a scam reflect a misunderstanding of their purpose. Reparations are not about monetary payouts, but a comprehensive approach to repairing historical harm. This includes education and economic investments, cultural recognition, and systemic reforms to address the deep-rooted inequities caused by slavery and colonialism. Reparations are an opportunity for the UK to lead in justice, healing, and fairness, not an act of division or grievance. Both the Bible and the Quran emphasize the importance of justice, accountability, and reconciliation. The Bible teaches us the sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations, Exodus 25, highlighting the enduring consequences of injustices left unaddressed. Yet it also offers hope and redemption. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their lands. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Similarly, the Quran reminds us of our duty to act justly and repair wrongs. Indeed, Allah commands you to render trust to whom they are due, and when you judge between people, to judge with justice. Excellent is that which Allah instructs you. Indeed, Allah is ever hearing and seeing. Quran 4:58. It also exhorts believers to mutual kindness and good deeds. And do not forget to do good to one another. Indeed, Allah sees all that you do. These principles call for nations and individuals to act with integrity and righteousness, seeking justice not just for the present, but to atone for the past and build a better future. As a public servant representing all UK citizens, I urge you to engage directly with African Caribbean communities to better understand their lived experiences and ongoing legacies of slavery and colonialism. I, along with others, am willing to facilitate these discussions to foster dialogue and mutual understanding. Additionally, I encourage you to explore works by respected historians and scholars, such as Stay in Power and Black People in the British Empire by Peter Fryer, Black Ivory by Professor James Walvin, and Britain's Black Debt and How Britain Underdeveloped the Caribbean by Sir Hilary Beckles. These texts provide critical insight into the history and lasting impact of Britain's colonial and slavery-driven economy. Reparations are an opportunity for the UK to address historical injustices and promote healing and reconciliation. By dismissing them, we risk perpetuating harm and alienation. I urge you to reconsider your stance and to lead with empathy, understanding, and a commitment to justice. As a nation, we must face our past with honesty and embrace the opportunity to build a fairer and more equitable future. So that is just a rough draft. There are some things that need to be corrected, obviously grammar and spelling, because some of the words are Americanized. But also there needs to be an addition of a quotation also from the Yoruba tradition, because Kemi comes from a Nigerian Yoruba background. So there is a Yoruba phrase regarding the need for justice and the equity of justice, which would also be added into the letter. But that's the first draft.
Very good. Can I offer?
But also I must thank our student protocol director for the assistance as well.
And can I just offer and thank you for the first draft? If there's anybody in the audience or on the panel who would like to contribute to the polishing of this particular document, please, Brother Hakim, can you give them put a contact email in the chat so that we can just maybe have a small council who can just...
No problem. Admin, can you put the CQT email in the chat for those that are listening, or those that are online via Facebook and obviously won't be able to access the chat? The email is CQT, that's CQT at NOI.org.uk. That's CQT at NOI.org.uk.
Fantastic. So with that said, I'm happy with our first draft. If you're happy with the first draft, put a number 2 in the chat just as we close out. And we want to thank...
Sorry, sir, I would say one other thing, sorry.
Sure.
Even if people are just willing to be a co-signer, again, you can email cqt at noi.org.uk and you can just send a simple email with the name and title that you're comfortable with in putting forward, and you could just send a simple email saying, I wish to be a co-signer to the letter, and we will make sure that your name and your title is also added to the letter to be sent off to Conservative leader Kemi. Thank you.
And what we want to also, if you can please advise the audience also how we intend to publicize our grievance.
Well, the letter won't just be sent to Kemi, but it would also be sent to some of our leading Black journalists and publications and other organizations, so it can be seen publicly, that because we was bemused and also disappointed with ourselves that such a statement was made on such an international global stage, and collectively as a community, we did not respond to that. We know again, sometimes I know we hate to do comparisons, but sometimes it's important. We know that if people are being anti-Semitic, there's a collective response.
Right.
So if someone's being anti-Kemetic or if someone's being Afrophobic, then there should be a collective response, privately as well as publicly.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is anti-Kemetic. I like that, brother.
Well, I can't take credit for that.
Can I share? Can I?
That was from one of our.
I won't plagiarize.
That was from one of our late brothers when he was a minister.
Share this with me.
When he was
anti-Kemetic.
But I can't take credit. I can't take credit. No, I can't take credit for that. That actually comes from one of our great teachers and warriors when he was a minister under the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Minister Dr. Khalid Abdul-Muhammad.
Right.
He coined that phrase back in the 80s.
I love it. I think we got to popularize that one, brother. I love it. So with that said, this is probably a first that we finished a bit early. I don't know why I thought we finished at 6:30 today, but I'm not going to keep my special guest. I'm going to ask Sister Aina-Nia for closing remarks from both of you. If you could please give us some closing remarks in regards to our discussion this evening.
Thank you so much, Minister. It's been an honor to have conversation with you. I hope we continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
I want to be a part of that. And I just say to my family, because that's what you are, every single person on here, is please, 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 please return to yourself. Return to yourself. We are amazing people. We are amazing people. So remember that. I love you. Love upon yourself in spite of all that is happening around us.
Yes, ma'am. We love you too. And thank you for your great contribution this evening. Sister Claire.
Just wanted to say thanks again to Brother Hakim and to Minister Abdul for inviting me. Lovely to be on the panel with you, my sister as well, Ania. And yeah, just keep having these conversations, keep resisting and working together. So I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity, and thanks also for watching the film After the Flood. I hope that it was helpful to you all and just gives us more to think about and to address.
It was one of the greatest films on the transatlantic slave trade that I have seen.
I bought it.
Yes, ma'am.
Vincent bought it.
That was so refreshing.
Well, on behalf of Sheila Marshall, I thank you, dear sister, for purchasing the film. And for all of the audience members out there, that's an example. So you have a sister from Canada. If one of our spiritual priests, teachers from Canada can buy the film, those of you that live within the UK have no excuse.
Oh, it should be in everybody's library, that film. And if you could put something in the chat where we can find it and purchase it, then that would be a good use of our time. If all of us go away, some of you on this line, you will be celebrating Christmas. I know you will. So as a consequence of that, this is a great gift of knowledge for your loved ones, okay? And if you don't celebrate Christmas and you celebrate Kwanzaa, this is a great Kwanzaa gift to your family. It reinforces all of the principles of Kwanzaa. That film was and is tremendous. All the contributors, their tempo was just so perfect, and everybody complimented each other in such a marvelous way that we were honored to be those who were screening it, and we would love to screen it again because it was such a joy to so do. And one of the directors was on the panel with us on Wednesday, and we had a ball, a great time with her. And we need more films like that. We really do. And we need those type of films to become series. And we need to start seeing those films on Netflix. Okay. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be on Netflix. So let's appeal to the Netflix or some of these others, Prime TV or Apple TV. Let's appeal to those concerned so that we can get some global airtime. And with that said, Brother Hakim, was there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we conclude?
No, sir, that's it. Wrapped up very nicely.
Very good. Well, all what's left for me to do. Sorry, brother.
I was not unless if there's a promotion ready for tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we're speaking about what is Islam? Like, what is Islam?
Yeah, that falls right in line.
And who should we allow to teach it to us? Because if you listen to these kinds of, or are taught by the wrong person, then you might support those who were a part of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. You
right.
get taught Christianity by the wrong person, you might become a part of the Ku Klux Klan. So, because they claim to be Christians. So let's be mindful of who teaches us the religion of our Father. Okay. So that's what we're going to be discussing tomorrow. What is Islam and who is qualified to teach us? Okay. So with that said, thank you. Come join us. That's on Zoom tomorrow, 11 a.m. UK time until 1. Come join us in the comfort of your own home. We won't be long-winded. We'll be finished within an hour and a half. Come on. Did it go down? If it went down too fast, let's put that in the chat, the flyer in the chat, so that all those concerned can get the link for tomorrow. So with that said, Brother Hakim, we look forward to being back in the next 2 weeks for another episode of this great community question time. And we intend to illuminate more minds and to purify more hearts and to convict more spirits to the great struggle of the liberation of us as a people and the liberation of the world as a whole. Because once we're liberated, we will free the world, because we're the only ones who has a heart of the tremendous love, which is tantamount to the love of God. Because even though we've been through the most horrific experiences, we don't have hate in our heart. We have a desire for justice. That's what we want. We want justice. We don't want anybody to go through what we went through. We want to put a stop to slavery, and we want to put a stop to injustice. And we're the best ones qualified to do it. So with that said, thank you for being with us this Saturday evening. Some of you have sacrificed Arsenal, you sacrificed Liverpool games, you sacrificed useless Manchester United, and you sacrificed all of this.
This is the real man. This is the real man and woman United now. Come on now.
To be with us this evening. So lots of love to all of you who shared the link with friends and family. We love you. We appreciate you. Sister Nia, Sister Claire, Aina-Nia, we love you both, and thank you for your great insight in being with us. We really appreciated our panelists. Let's give our panel another big, massive, well-deserved round of applause. Love you, panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So to everybody, good night. And if we don't see you until 2025, have a blessed end to your year. Happy Kwanzaa to everybody. But we do hope that we'll see you in the next couple of weeks. And we do hope that you'll sign off on our letter to the leader of the opposition, our sister. And we hope that she will recognize what she done was totally unacceptable and make amends for that bad behavior, or for being influenced by those who don't have her best interest at heart. Lots of love, peace, and blessings onto each and every one of you, and a very good night. Thank you. Thank you.